They laughed when she stepped on the stage, until the floor beneath her feet shook. If you have ever judged someone just by how they look, this story will haunt you and change you. And if you believe in underdogs who fight back with quiet power, then hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to hear is unforgettable. Her name was Clara May. She was 52, worked at the same small-town grocery store for 27 years, wore her hair in a bun, drove a dusty blue hatchback, and always wore the same faded sneakers. People called her invisible, never married, no kids. Most people assumed she had nothing special about her until the local fitness challenge posted its registration sheet, and she signed up. The annual Ironway Challenge was a big deal in Dalton County. News crews came, former athletes participated, and local sponsors threw in thousands of dollars in prize money. It was not just about lifting weights, it was about ego. It was about who people believed deserved to stand on that platform. When Clara's name was read out loud at the community center sign-up, two younger women sitting behind the desk smirked. One leaned to the other and whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "Maybe there is a senior's version we do not know about." Clara looked up for a second, said nothing, just smiled gently and handed over the pen. The mockery did not end there. At the gym, people whispered. One man said, "She will drop the bar on her neck." Another joked that someone should keep a stretcher nearby when she tries to deadlift, and during warm-ups, when she slowly tied her shoelaces and stretched in. Silence, phones came out. People filmed her. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. You do not belong here. But there was one thing no one knew. Not a single soul in that gym realized what Clara had been through just to stand on that mat. No one knew what she had survived, what she had trained for, what she had lost, and what still burned inside her. Every time someone looked down on her for how she looked, that silence, it was not weakness, it was a warning. And soon, they were going to find out. 2 weeks before the competition, Clara stopped by a local supplement shop downtown. The place was always packed with fitness enthusiasts, young, loud, branded from head to toe in tight, dry-fit gear. Clara, in her usual oversized sweatshirt and plain jogging pants, walked in quietly, holding a folded piece of paper in her hand. It was a list, not of protein powders or pre-workouts, but of ingredients she had researched herself. She did not trust commercial hype. She had never needed shortcuts. As she waited at the counter, a group of 3 men, lean, muscular, loud, were talking just a few feet away. One of them turned, saw her standing there, and chuckled. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Senior discounts are next door." His friends burst out laughing. Clara's face did not change. She nodded at him slowly, then placed her list on the counter in front of the cashier. "I just need these 5 things. Nothing fancy, just what works." The cashier, visibly uncomfortable with the way she was being treated, quickly gathered her items. As she paid, one of the laughing men shouted across the store, "Hope the competition has a knitting round." But Clara did not respond. She never did. Instead, she walked out the door calmly, her bag in hand. What they could not know, what they had no idea about, was that Clara had trained in silence. In her garage, with old metal bars, wooden planks, and sandbags, she had filled herself. She had watched hundreds of hours of training footage, not to compete but to heal, from a loss that had left her breathless for years. Her brother, Michael, had died of a heart attack at 43. He had been overweight, tired, ashamed of himself, and ignored by everyone at the gym because of his size. He used to joke, "Maybe if I looked like them, they would listen." Clara never forgot those words. When he passed, something in her changed. She had made a quiet vow that day. She would enter that world, and she would not demand respect. She would earn it, but not by shouting, not by mocking, not by recording others and laughing behind their backs. She would do it with her strength, with her silence, with her soul, and with every breath, every rep, every bruise. She was getting closer to the moment that would shock them all. The morning of the competition arrived with clear skies and buzzing energy. Cars lined the street outside the Dalton County Sports Complex. Vendors set up protein shake booths. A local radio station blasted upbeat music from a van. Inside, the arena was brightly lit, filled with cheering families, flexing athletes, and rows of camera crews preparing for live stream coverage. Clara walked in alone, carrying a small duffel, bag and a thermos. She wore an old gray hoodie and black sweatpants. No sponsors, no logos, no flashy colors. Just her breath, and her purpose. As she walked toward the locker room, a volunteer at the check-in table glanced up and paused. He looked at her, then down at the list, confused. "You're Clara May?" She nodded, offering her ID. The volunteer hesitated, then mumbled, "You're in Group C. That's the strength division. You sure that's correct?" "I am," she replied quietly, without blinking. Behind her, she heard a voice she recognized. It was Cassie, one of the gym influencers who had been filming her during training days. "Group C? You're joking," Cassie scoffed, arms crossed, mid-laugh. "She's competing against me?" Her friends howled. One whispered loudly, "Maybe. It's a social experiment." Clara ignored them. Again. She walked straight past into the locker room and sat in front of an empty mirror. She pulled out an old photograph. Her brother Michael, sweaty and smiling at a park bench, holding a water bottle in one hand and a sandwich in the other. The edges were worn, the ink faded. She stared at it for a moment, then slipped it into her hoodie pocket. Outside, the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Welcome to the 17th Annual Ironway Fitness Challenge. We have a record number of competitors this year, and an even bigger prize pool, $10,000 for the strongest competitor. In each category." The crowd roared. Clara stayed seated. She knew this was not about the prize, it was about everything they had said. Every glance, every snide comment, every dismissive shrug. She tied her shoes, tight. She stood up, slow and steady. And as she walked, out onto the floor, the crowd barely noticed. But they were about to. The warm-up round began with a basic lift, 135 pounds on a standard barbell. For most competitors, it was just routine, a way to stretch their muscles, loosen their nerves. But when Clara stepped up to the bar, eyes started turning, not out of respect, but disbelief. Some in the crowd leaned forward with morbid curiosity. Others lifted their phones to record. A couple in the front row actually started laughing. "You may better have someone spot her," someone whispered loudly. Clara stood at the bar, centered her stance, took a deep breath, and gripped the medal. No hesitation. No wasted motion. She lifted. Smooth. Controlled. Locked at the top. The judge raised. "A green flag. Successful lift," the crowd murmured. That was unexpected. As Clara stepped back, Cassie walked by with a bright smile. "Nice job, Grandma," she said through clenched teeth. "Hope your joints survive round 2. Clara met her eyes. Calm. No words. In round 2, the weight increased. 185 pounds, then 210. Half of the competitors in her group were already failing. Reps Cassie lifted with effort, but passed. Clara's turn came. The arena was quieter now. She stepped up, focused, her breathing steady. Lift, control, lock. Another green flag. The murmurs turned into silence. Now, even the MC was taking notice. And would you look at that? Clara May, the surprise name of Group D, just cleared 210 pounds like it was nothing. Someone in the crowd whistled. Cassie, watching from the corner of her eye, frowned. By the third round, the number of competitors had dropped to 5. Clara was one of them. Now it was 240 pounds, a weight that would break most casual lifters, and some trained ones too. Cassie went first. She struggled, knees wobbled, shoulders shook, but she locked it in. Barely. Clara stepped up, and for the first time the audience went quiet on purpose. No one laughed now, no phones came up, no side comments, only eyes. She bent down, took a breath, lifted, smooth, powerful, fluid like water, locked. The judge stared, stunned, then raised the green flag. The crowd erupted, cheers, applause, and somewhere in that noise, Cassie's voice could no longer be heard. After the third round, the air in the arena had changed. The same crowd that once laughed was now leaning forward in their seats, whispering Clara's name like it was a rumor they were afraid to say. Too loud. Backstage, tension tightened like a knot. Cassie paced near the water table, wiping sweat from her forehead, her expression no longer playful. Her friends, now quieter, watched Clara with guarded glances. She is just lucky, one of them muttered. No way she has stamina left, another added. But none of them could deny the truth anymore. Clara had made it this far, and she had not missed a single lift. Not one. The next round was the final test. The endurance carry competitors had to hoist a 150-pound sandbag and walk the full length of the gym floor and back, without dropping it, without pausing, no breaks. It separated lifters from warriors. Cassie went first. She moved fast at the start, her legs strong, but by the halfway mark, her pace slowed. Her shoulders tensed. When she returned, she nearly collapsed into the wall. The crowd gave her a respectful cheer, but their eyes were now looking for someone else. Clara. She stepped forward. The announcer hesitated, then spoke. Next up, Clara May. The crowd erupted, cheering not in irony, but in hope. She walked up to the sandbag, took a breath, and lifted. It was not quick, it was not dramatic, but it was clean, balanced, grounded. Clara began walking. Her steps were heavy but calm, her arms wrapped tightly around the weight. Her jaw was clenched. Her eyes focused straight ahead. Halfway through, a camera zoomed in on her face. There were tears in her eyes, but they were not from pain. They were from memory, from grief, from her brother's voice in her head saying, "They will never see you, not unless you show them." She reached the end, turned and walked back, every step louder than the last, every breath louder than the crowd. When she crossed the finish line, she did not drop the weight. She set it down with her hands, gently, like it mattered, and the arena went silent for 2 whole seconds, then erupted, louder than ever. No one said "Grandma" again. And Cassie? Cassie looked away, because she knew she had already lost, before the scores were even tallied. The judges took their time. They gathered near the stage, whispering and pointing at the score sheets. One of them shook his head and chuckled. Another kept glancing toward Clara, then back at the final column of numbers. Meanwhile, the crowd buzzed like a storm. Some were standing now. Strangers leaned over to each other asking, "Who is she? Where did she come from? Was she a professional before?" Clara remained seated on the bench near the weight racks, sipping water from her thermos. She looked down at her hands, red, trembling slightly. She rubbed her palm gently and smiled to herself. That was the same hand she had once used to lift her brother Michael after his fall in the kitchen. The same hand that cleaned floors, stocked shelves, fixed leaking pipes, and carried grocery. Bags for elderly neighbors who never even said thank you. Now those hands had silenced a room full of doubters. Cassie stood off to the side with her arms crossed. The camera still pointed at her, but her smile had faded. Her jaw was tight, and for the first time all day, no one wanted a selfie with her. They were watching someone else. The announcer walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have this year's Ironway strength champion." The crowd roared. He waited, built suspense, then lifted the results sheet dramatically. In first place by unanimous decision, with perfect execution across all rounds. He paused. Clara May. The arena exploded. Not polite applause, not soft clapping. A full-on standing ovation. Clara stood slowly, not to show off, not to soak in the praise, but because something inside her had finally unfolded. As she walked toward the podium, people she had never met reached out to touch her hand, to say, "Thank you," to say, "You inspired me." Cassie turned her back. She could not watch. The announcer handed Clara the medal, a solid gold piece, heavy, shiny, beautiful. She held it in her hand for a moment, then looked out at the crowd and said just one line, "This is not for me." She reached into her hoodie pocket, pulled out the worn photograph of Michael, and raised it high. It is for the ones who were never seen. The arena fell silent again, not out of shock this time, but out of respect. People were crying. The cameramen lowered their equipment. The judges stood and clapped. And at that moment, Clara May became more than a champion. She became a story no one would forget. That night, Clara walked home. She had been offered a ride by 3 different people. One even insisted they call her a car. But she had declined each time with a soft smile. Her legs were tired, sure, her hands ached, but there was something sacred about walking, about feeling the pavement under her feet, about taking each step herself. The medal swung gently in her hoodie pocket, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was elsewhere, on the faces in the crowd, the shift, the silence, the disbelief turning into admiration. Not because she needed validation, but because, for once they had seen her, not as a quiet store worker, not as an old lady in sweatpants, but as something they had not expected. Strong, worthy, undeniable. When she got home, the house was still and dark. She stepped inside and turned on the small lamp in the corner, casting a warm, golden glow across the living room. Her eyes fell on the shelf above the fireplace, where Michael's old gym shoes still sat, tucked between 2 faded trophies from a school marathon he had once won. Clara walked over. She gently placed the medal next to them. Then she sat on the couch, exhaled slowly, and let the tears come. Not from sadness, not from exhaustion, but from release. From years of being overlooked, underestimated, and ignored, washed away in a single. The next morning, the town had changed. The local newspaper had already published a front-page photo of Clara mid-lift with the headline, "The Woman Who Lifted a Town's Respect." At the grocery store, people stopped her in the aisles. Customers who had once walked past her without eye contact now asked to shake her hand. Teens who used to snicker behind her back were now reposting videos of her lift with captions like, "Goals," and "Strongest woman I've ever seen." Even Cassie eventually posted a story. No words, just a video of Clara's final lift and the text, "Respect." It did not undo everything, but it was something. Clara did not say much. She never needed to. But when a local reporter came to ask how it felt to be the town's new hero, she paused, thought carefully, and said, "I am not a hero. I am just someone they forgot to notice." And then, smiling, "But they will not forget again." The following week, something unexpected happened. Clara received a letter, not an email, not a text, a real handwritten envelope delivered to her door with a gold-embossed seal on the back. She opened it carefully, her fingers still sore from the competition, and unfolded the thick cardstock inside. It was an invitation from the State Athletic Council. They had seen the footage of her performance. It had gone viral across multiple platforms, picked up by sports pages and inspirational channels alike. The letter formally invited her to compete in the regional masters-level powerlifting championship. All expenses paid, uniforms provided, media training included. They even offered a small sponsorship deal. Clara blinked twice, unsure if she was reading it right. She sat down at the kitchen table and laid the letter flat, staring at the words. Her first instinct was to say no. She never entered the Ironweight Challenge to become famous. She did not care about trophies. All she had wanted was to prove something, to herself, to Michael's memory, to the people who had mocked her. But then she thought of something else. She thought about the 3 young girls who had come up to her after the event, eyes wide, asking if she could teach them how to lift. She thought about the teenage boy who quietly left a note on her door that read, "Thank you. Because of you, I believe I can try again." And she remembered a time years ago when Michael had said, "Maybe if someone like me ever made it, it would open a door for the rest." Clara picked up the letter and walked to the window. Outside, the town bustled as usual. But now, when people walked past her home, they looked in with admiration, not pity, not confusion. They saw her. She folded the letter back neatly, placed it on the table beside Michael's photo, and whispered, "Maybe this time, I do not just walk through the door. Maybe I hold it open." She picked up her old sneakers, laced them tight, and walked back to the garage, the same garage where she had trained in silence, where she had cried, where she had once believed no one would ever care. But now, that place had become sacred, not because it made her strong, but because it reminded her, strength is not about being loud. It is about showing up when no one expects. You do. Clara stood before a faded chalkboard in the back of the local community center, her hands dusted with white powder, and a room full of nervous faces looking back at her. 15 people had signed up for the free class, not because they wanted to be bodybuilders, but because they wanted to believe in themselves again. Some were teens, shy and awkward, hiding behind hoodies and headphones. Others were middle-aged mothers and fathers carrying not just extra weight on their bodies, but invisible burdens, shame, doubt, fear. And one man, maybe in his 70s, sat quietly in the corner, holding a water bottle and looking like he had not stepped into a gym in decades. Clara took a breath. Then she wrote 2 words on the board: strength, choice. Not perfection, not muscle, not applause. Choice. She turned to the class. We are not here to chase someone else's standard, she said. We are here to build our own, 1 rep at a time. The crowd was silent, listening, hanging on her every word. This was not the woman they expected. She had no microphone, no camera crew, no brand deal banners. She had scars on her hands and a steady voice, and it was enough. As they started warm-ups, Clara moved through the rows, adjusting a stance. Here, guiding a grip there. She gave gentle encouragement, short nods, quiet affirmations. No shouting, no performance, just presence. Word about her class spread fast. By the 2nd week, more than 30 people were showing up. By the 3rd, local papers were writing headlines, like the champion who taught a town to rise. She was offered a coaching position at a high-end gym in the city. She declined, because the people who needed her most were not lifting in designer leggings under neon lights. They were here, in worn shoes, in silence, trying again. One afternoon after class, the old man from the back approached her. His name was Roy. He had tears in his eyes. I used to train with my son, he whispered. Before the accident, I never thought I would come back here. Thank you for giving me something to look forward to again. Clara smiled, held his hand, and said, softly, you showed up, that means more than any trophy. And in that moment, surrounded by tired, smiling, ordinary people, she realized she had already won more than any medal could offer. 6 months later, the town held its first ever Community Strength Day, an open event for people of all ages, to celebrate resilience, healing, and unity. What started as a small idea from Clara had grown into something far bigger. The park was alive with motion, pull-up bars, light dumbbells, relay challenges, and stretching stations run by volunteers, who had once been students in Clara's first class. Music played softly through speakers, laughter echoed near the lakeside, and kids ran in circles cheering for their parents as they tried a new lift or finished a push-up. In the center of it all was Clara. She wore the same old hoodie, the same humble sneakers. But the way people looked at her, it was different now. They did not see weakness. They saw wisdom. Not just the kind that comes from years, but the kind that comes from choosing to rise, when it would have been easier to stay down. A young reporter from a regional channel asked to interview her. What do you want people to remember you for? The girl asked, holding the mic nervously. Clara paused, then looked out at the park, the laughter, the effort, the joy. Not for lifting weights, she said simply. The reporter blinked. I want them to remember that once. A quiet woman walked into a room full of doubt and chose to be brave anyway. And that choice made others believe they could too. The girl lowered the mic. She had no follow-up, because the answer was complete. As the sun dipped low and families packed up to leave, Clara sat on the same old bench where Michael used to sit during his breaks. She pulled out his photo, now faded from all the years she had carried it close. I did it, Mike, she whispered, tears forming. But more than that, we did it. Behind her, a child giggled. lifting a mini dumbbell for the first time, cheered on by two friends. And in that instant, Clara knew her story was no longer hers alone. It was a seed, planted in a place where no one had believed anything could grow. But now, hope was lifting.